every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Can you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth. It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate. Both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
And good morning, it's 9:30 on Monday the 30th of October. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Emily Carver in for Bev Turner.
Yes, now terror threat in the UK. Ministers will hold an emergency Cobra meeting today over concerns that Israel-Hamas conflict could accelerate the chance of a terror attack in the UK. We'll have the latest.
And Brits trapped in Gaza. Hamas is preventing Britons leaving Gaza, according to the United States Security President, the US President's security advisor. Meanwhile, Israeli tanks are pouring over the border, continuing their ground assault to destroy what they call the stronghold of evil and to dismantle Hamas. Our security editor, Mark White, is in Tel Aviv with the latest.
Well, just in the last few minutes, we've had the second largest barrage of rockets from Gaza of the day going into southern going into southern Israel and also into central Israel in the last few minutes.
Barge access denied. 2 Labour MPs are going to Portland today to meet asylum seekers living on the Bibby Stockholm, but they were not given permission to go on board. What's happening there?
And the tributes are continuing, of course. Messages of condolence from around the world are flooding in for Matthew Perry, the star of the sitcom Friends, who died far too young, just 54.
That's what we've got coming up, and lots more, of course. Please do let us know all of your thoughts, some of your thoughts on our talking points today. Email us gbviews@gbnews.com, tweet us at gbnews. But first, let's get the news headlines with Sophia.
Good morning, it's 9:32. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. The government will hold an emergency meeting to discuss the threat of terrorism from the Israel-Hamas conflict. Anti-Semitic and Islamophobic incidents have increased since the 7th of October, with pro-Palestinian demonstrations taking place across the country. The Foreign Secretary says there's a risk the conflict escalates and spreads across the region. The current threat to the country from terrorism is substantial, meaning an attack is likely. Meanwhile, the US President's security advisor says Hamas is preventing Britons from leaving Gaza. People in Gaza continue to face air and artillery bombardment as Israel's ground offensive into the Strip continues. Israeli tanks and troops are pressing into the enclave, with the Israel Defense Forces saying it's hit more than 600 military targets in the past few days. The Palestinian Red Crescent says it's been warned by Israeli authorities to immediately evacuate the Al-Quds hospital in Gaza City, where 14,000 people are being sheltered. AI tools will be rolled out in classrooms across England. That's according to the Prime Minister. Rishi Sunak says the technology will help reduce teachers' workloads, with AI designing lesson plans and quizzes. It's part of a £2 million investment in new classroom technology, which is equivalent to employing around 40 teachers. More wet weather is set to bring disruption to several parts of the country ahead of the arrival of Storm Ciarán later this week. Heavy rain and strong wind is expected in southern and southwest England, as well as South Wales and Northern Ireland. The Environment Agency has issued 72 flood warnings ahead of the storm on Wednesday night. And you can get more on all those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com. Now it's back to Andrew and Emily.
Well, ministers are holding an emergency COBRA meeting today over concerns the Israeli-Gaza conflict could accelerate the threat of terrorism on the streets of Britain.
Yes, the meeting is going to take place after Britain's most senior police officer warned that events in the Middle East were having a serious knock-on effect here in Britain. 5 people were charged this weekend at a pro-Palestinian protest.
So do our police officers need greater powers of arrest? Well, joining us to talk to us, as he does every week on a Monday, is our favourite political commentator, Piers Pottinger. Piers, why are protesters and demonstrators, of course they've got the right to protest and demonstrate, why are they allowed to wear masks and have bandanas over their faces? What are they hiding?
Well, that's a very good question, of course. The COBRA meeting, I think, will try where they can to tighten up on this. Although I think Sir Mark Rowley, who's a former head of anti-terrorism himself, the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, is well aware of what needs to be tightened. Suella Braverman has announced a review into the laws on extremism and terrorism. But the problem is, it's another review. It's going to take months. It won't be in place legally until at least a year. So that's too late. And what's happening on the streets of Britain is beginning to get very worrying indeed. And I'm particularly concerned we're all wearing poppies today. The 12th of November, Remembrance Sunday, isn't far away. There could be some, could be a very dangerous flashpoint, which I'm sure the authorities are well aware about. But, for example, Iran has these agents in this country stirring up the demonstrations, and they're mostly attached to the Islamic paramilitary guard corps in Iran, which is the most powerful body in Iran. And that is prescribed by many people as a terrorist organisation, but not Britain at the moment. And I'm hopeful that that could happen without a review, so that these anyone who is clearly an Iranian agent stirring up hatred could be dealt with.
And surely it's against the law if someone is chanting jihad, holy war. That is incitement.
Well, you would have thought so.
And that should just be slam dunk, arrest them.
Well, I think anyone encouraging war is inciting. And in these times where it is, I mean, we're in a real tinderbox here. And I fear that there are going to be many more incidents all around the world where we have these demonstrations that are being... it's not a demonstration, it's actually just hatred on the streets. I mean, they're not demonstrating about anything that anyone can do anything about at the moment, other than a ceasefire, which, of course, everyone would love to see, but is unlikely to happen, while Israel is wreaking its revenge.
But is it maybe a bit of a cop-out from Mark Rowley to talk about how legislation needs to be tightened up? Because we do have incitement to violence is a crime, racial hatred is a crime. Surely there are public order offences.
Yes.
And, you know, we have hate crimes.
Yes, I mean, I do think the masks is something that could be done with, because you do wonder why these people are so scared of being recognised on facial recognition cameras. But to be fair, you can't just round up every demonstrator. Because that, again, could provoke even worse reactions.
we do support the legitimate right of protest in this country.
Free speech is
very important.
Of course,
Cornerstone
still very
here.
important. And, of course, people who want to show sympathy for Palestinians who are suffering a great deal at the moment, fair enough. Equally, people who want to show sympathy for Israel after the horrible atrocities of the Hamas terrorism should be allowed to do that as well. But if they are inciting violence of any kind, they need to be dealt with. The problem is you can't just go and suddenly arrest thousands of people, because that would provoke even worse.
But, you know, I saw 3 young men on a tube at the weekend. They'd got sort of bandanas or neckerchiefs, whatever, over their faces, shouting, who on this tube platform is Israeli?
Yes.
Threatening, menacing.
No, it is.
And sadly, I didn't intervene. I'm probably a bit too old now, and these were young men. But that's really disturbing. Nobody did anything about it. No British Transport Police anywhere to be seen.
You must have been shaking with
It was just
fury.
horrible.
Well, a friend of mine was on a bus the other day when a woman got onto the bus, and before she actually got on properly, she said to the driver, "Are you with us or against us?"
Terrible.
And, I mean, you know, these are snapshots, Andrew, but they're very terrifying.
I want to get your reaction to what we've seen in Russia. This is anti-Semitism rearing its ugly head. This is an airport in Dagestan. We don't have sound on this one, but as you can see, there are floods of people looking for Israelis. So there was a flight that came into this airport. They're looking for Jews.
Coming from Tel Aviv.
Yes. And it's in a Muslim area of Russia. Yes, I mean, that is the sort of thing that I'm afraid there's going to be more of. It is very worrying. Hence, I mean, the Cobra meeting is incredibly serious because we've got to keep law and order in this country. You have to remember that what Hamas and the Iranians want is as much disorder in the West as they can create. And at the moment, a lot of these demonstrators, sometimes unwittingly, are playing Hamas's game for them. That's what's worrying.
And we should be clear what anti-Semitism is, because I'm afraid there are a lot of people out there who simply don't know what it means. Anti-Semitism is Jew-hating. That's what it is, and I think we should call it that.
Yes, and it's, I mean, absolutely horrific. But it shows you also what's happened recently is how the underlying current of anti-Semitism is still here. And we've seen it already. I mean, it's coming back to haunt the Labour Party.
I was going to ask you about that.
Keir Starmer's going to have to deal with
How would you advise him on this?
He's got a big problem on his hands, as is evident by the councillors resigning, 3 or 4 of his shadow cabinet supposedly not sympathetic to his views. He's got a very difficult situation. And from a point of view of an election a year away, if he doesn't deal with this properly, it could cost him the election, because at times of really international danger and also domestic danger, and this is probably, as I said last week, actually, this is one of the most terrifying moments in my lifetime. And I am very, very worried about the escalation of this.
Absolutely.
And we're seeing it happening, and it's going to happen more and more, I'm afraid to say.
I wonder what Keir Starmer will do when it comes to the likes of Andy MacDonald, far-left Corbynite MP. He was at the rally. He was, well, shouting, talking about the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people. And
using that horrible trope, river to the sea. We know what that means.
Calling
Eliminate
on
the state of Israel.
Going completely against the leaders.
Yes. Well, he should remove the Labour whip from him straight away, but he won't. I don't think, because again, he's trying to manage his party, and he has an awful lot of Muslim voters in the many Labour constituencies to be concerned about. And the problem is, you see, that the Muslim, it shouldn't become a Muslim versus Jew issue.
No.
And sensible Muslims know that it's actually Hamas that's causing the real problems in Palestine. They're not actually, Hamas doesn't give a damn about their own people.
Well, they hate their own people because they use them as human shields.
Of course they
And we shouldn't forget they've been governing Gaza since 2006 without an election.
Yes,
They're
and also governing it very badly indeed, by the way. It's not as if no one wants to go back to that.
No.
And from the point of view of demonstrations, we're talking about a new Palestine government, one would imagine. But, I mean, goodness knows when that'll ever happen.
I don't know if you're on TikTok, but there is some
Probably not.
videos
We old ones aren't.
out there of people in this country who quite openly supporting the actions of Hamas, calling it a resistance.
Yes.
This is what we're dealing with, and I do worry that young Muslims in this country, and also people of all ethnicities and religions, are buying into this narrative.
Well, these young men I saw shouting on the tube station.
Buying into the narrative
into
that Hamas are the freedom fighters and that this is all Israel's fault. But there you go. What can we do about that? Should we move on to the COVID inquiry?
Big story this week, of course, because we've got Dominic Cummings, who was Boris Johnson's chief advisor, who, we should forget, famously broke the rules himself, giving evidence tomorrow, and emerging that Boris was more sympathetic to a more relaxed lockdown.
Well, today is Martin Reynolds, who was Boris's parliamentary private secretary, PPS, and known as Party Marty. And he has been pretty widely pilloried already for a couple of emails. And I believe that he's going to have to face an awful lot of anti-Boris questioning. But this whole COVID inquiry seems to be missing the point. What we should be concentrating on, and solely concentrating on, is how to prevent something like this happening again in the future.
Right.
And Sweden has had its inquiry, dealt with it, come up with points of action, and they also questioned the science. The government, when this was happening, kept saying we're following the science, and it turned out the science was wrong. And no one's questioning that. Instead of, Simon Case, the cabinet secretary, people concentrating on what WhatsApp he sent saying, oh, I've had a long day, I'm going home. That's irrelevant. What does that matter? Do we need a massive hundreds of millions of pound inquiry into this? And what we need to do is to prevent this awful thing happening again.
And Boris lost his job over this.
Yes.
Effectively.
Well, he lost it effectively because he lied to Parliament on more than one occasion. And unfortunately, that's unforgivable.
What do you think the public think of this? Do you think the public just want this over and done with quickly?
Well, I think so, yes. I mean, there seems to be, we live in a blame culture and everyone wants to blame everyone. And, of course, with hindsight, it's very easy. You could have done it differently. And it's never happened before in modern times. There are a lot of excuses you can make, but equally, it now is apparent that lockdown was wrong and we needn't have done it, partly because the scientists confused lockdown with quarantine. And there's no point locking people down if plane loads of Chinese are flying in every day, bringing new variants of the pandemic. It's crazy.
Well, some of us were warning about the negative consequences of lockdown policies whilst we were in the midst of it. It's not all hindsight.
No.
Some people were saying, I think that's all we've got time for, Piers.
Sadly,
I know,
Piers.
sadly. Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining us. Always a joy.
Fantastic
That's Piers
insight.
Pottinger. Always, yum.
Now, 2 Labour MPs are going to Portland today. Why? To meet some of the asylum seekers staying on the Bibby Stockholm barge.
My instinct is, what did the asylum seekers do to deserve that fate? They're getting the backbenchers Nadia Whittome and Lloyd Russell-Moore, who is a complete pain, by the way. He's one of the Brighton MPs. They'd hoped to see the inside of the barge, but they claim the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, didn't reply to their letter, asking permission to do so.
OK, well, we're going to speak to Susan Phoenix, who is a campaigner from the No to the Barge group. Thank you for joining us, Susan. What's your reaction to these 2 Labour backbench MPs wanting to come to Portland and meet the asylum seekers on the barge?
Very similar to yours, actually, of course. I wish they had come to meet our homeless people. I wish they'd come to meet the local population, as nobody else in positions of power have done. The desperation of people down here, that just watching the greed of the privileged few who have dumped this barge on us, nothing to do with the people inside, the barge, the expensive amount of money being spent on it. So that's what these gentlemen should be asking for. But they probably won't be let on board. I think only a few privileged local odd groups have been allowed on there. Nobody that has any sense or common sense.
Susan, what is the nub of your objection to the barge being in Portland, in your backyard? What is the nub of the objection?
Oh.
Have we lost you? Don't think she heard you there.
We'll try again. Susan, I'm asking you, if you could outline, what is the nub of your objection to the barge being there? No, we've lost her. What a pity. I mean, I think I know.
Well, what do you think it is?
Well, they think because well, A, they weren't consulted. The local MP wasn't consulted. We've had him on this programme more than once. And why have Portland got them there? They can wander freely in the community. They're worried about crime, they're worried about the money it's costing, and as Susan was saying, they've got a homeless problem there, and who's doing anything for the local homeless?
Well, you know what? Nadia Whittome and Lloyd Russell Moyle, according to the Mirror here, have claimed they've been blocked from visiting the Theatre of Cruelty, they call it.
Well, how do they have the Theatre of Cruelty if they've not been on it?
And let's remember, this barge is costing, again, reported figure, £800 per person each night.
Ridiculous.
Which is quite extraordinary. And, of course, it was sitting empty for so long because of the Legionella outbreak.
Is it cheaper than the hotel?
Well, surely it must be more expensive, £800.
And if
that figure is correct.
And don't they have their own chef, their own games room? It doesn't sound to me like a theatre of cruelty. It sounds like some people would probably rather enjoy it.
Yes, so they wanted to go. Miss Whittome wanted to go. She said it could become a place of punishment, so she had to see firsthand what the conditions were like. She says visits such as this are crucial to ensure that minimum living standards are scrupulously upheld on the barge, as they clearly have not been in the recent past. So I guess the question from Susan there was...
Because I think we've got her back.
Oh,
Susan, have we got you back, Susan?
Ah, yes,
Susan, we've got you back. Just tell us, basically, I mean, why local people like you are so opposed to this barge being in your midst?
Because of the social division it's causing. We don't have the infrastructure for our own community, never mind 500 new people, whoever they are and wherever they're from. Nobody put any forethought into this. It's just been the greed of the privileged few. And from start to finish, it's been the income at the top, the Home Office bullying people, right down to our local port who took the money. And I'm just reading their manifesto today saying how helpful they are to the local community with our local port owners. No. They didn't look at whether we could afford to support all of these people, whether we had the road structure, the health, the policing. We don't have any of that, even sufficient for our local community. There was just no common sense. I think that's what's annoying people most. Who made these decisions?
Yeah, well, Susan, thank you for that. That's Susan Phoenix, who is leading the objections to the barge. Who did make the decision? Say, the local MP, first he knew about it when he read about it in the papers.
Well, it's the same with a lot of the hotels. These local councils are expected to absorb this number of people, and I don't think the funding is coming from central government.
No,
so
when you say the councils have to absorb it, the local people, through their council tax, have to pay it. It's outrageous.
Yeah, well, let us know what you think at home about Nadia Whittome and, what's his name, Lloyd Russell Moyle wanting to visit.
I say again, what did those asylum seekers do to deserve that fate?
Well, in other news, in Gaza, armoured vehicles continue to pour into Gaza as the Israeli Defence Forces begin to take over the Strip piece by piece.
The military claims soldiers spotted armed terrorists and an anti-tank missile launching post near the Al-Azhar University and guided a fighter jet to strike them.
Well, our security editor, Mark White, is in Tel Aviv for us. Mark, can you bring us the latest? Any updates from yesterday over the weekend?
Yeah, I'll bring you an update from Jerusalem, first of all. Reports of an attack, a stabbing attack that took place in Jerusalem within the last hour. A police officer said to be in a critical condition That critically injured police officer has been transferred to hospital now. The alleged attacker has been, according to Israeli authorities, neutralised. So a lot of security around that area. It was in the area of a light rail station in Jerusalem just an hour ago or so. Across Israel, there is a heightened alert, as well as for the rockets that come over all of the time, really, from the Gaza Strip into parts of Israel. There is also a heightened state of alert for the potential for attacks, terrorist attacks. We know that in the West Bank, for instance, there was more unrest, fighting overnight, with reports that 4 Palestinians have been killed in those clashes with Israeli police and military in the West Bank. And in terms of the operation, well, that is continuing apace in Gaza, according to the Israeli Defense Forces spokesman, Daniel Hagari, who gave his briefing an hour and a bit ago and said that Israeli forces on the ground are inside northern Gaza and continuing to advance slowly and encountering Hamas terrorists, are exchanging fire. According to Daniel Hagari, dozens of Hamas terrorists have been killed in those clashes overnight, but still, as I say, the rockets keep on coming. There was a number of rocket barrages overnight and this morning into IDF positions around the Gaza Strip, and then one just about 40 minutes or so ago into areas just south of Tel Aviv to Ashdod and surrounding areas.
All right, that's our security editor, Mark White, who's in Tel Aviv, talking about the latest situation in the ongoing crisis. And ongoing, it goes on and on, Emily.
Yeah, and continues to escalate. And as we were talking about earlier, the threat here on the streets of Britain is a massive concern for our government, for the public, and of course our security services.
Yeah, and the police, again, we have to remember, we're often very critical of the police, aren't we? But they are in the front line now with these marches and demonstrations, and they're right to be there, and people are equally right to be able to have the right to demonstrate and protest. But they have to do it within the law, and I agree with you. I think the laws are there already. I don't know why Sir Mark Rowley, the police commissioner, is saying, we need more laws. It will take months to get new laws. You have to get them through Parliament. And I'm not sure the Labour Party are going to play ball with any ramping up of the laws because of the growing conflict within the Labour Party leadership over Sir Keir Starmer's decision to support Israel.
Yeah, I mean, in theory, they could say it's an emergency, but we shall see.
Yeah.
Still to come, a row in the Welsh Government, plans to allow self-identifying transgender women to stand in Senate elections as females. This is Britain's Newsroom.
On GB.
Good morning, my name's Rachel Ayres and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast brought to you by the Met Office. So we saw plenty of rain and showers throughout the weekend and not a huge amount of change as we go into the new week. Heavy showers that could be thundery across southern parts of Wales and England as we go through this morning, with that overnight rain having cleared away from Scotland and northeast England. Some sunny spells around as well, especially across Scotland and central and eastern parts of England. And it'll feel pretty pleasant here, especially away from the coast where those winds are a little bit lighter. So highs of 14 to 16 in the south. They're a little bit cooler in the north with those northerly winds. Now, as we go through this afternoon, we'll see further showers continuing, but this band of showers will become a little bit more organised into this evening and bringing some heavy and persistent rain to Northern Ireland. So there could be some disruption here. Plenty of clear spells, though, ahead of this, especially across southern England and Scotland. And a bit of a chilly night across Scotland as well. Could be a touch of frost in some sheltered rural spots. So to start Tuesday then, we'll see this band of organised showers making its way very slowly northeastwards. So driest conditions to the northeast of this with the best of the sunshine across Scotland. A little bit of respite from the showers across the southwest before this next system makes its way in as we go into Tuesday afternoon. And still feeling pretty pleasant in the sunshine. Always cooler though across Scotland with those northerly winds bringing that cooler air.
Well, up next, a Labour government in Wales wants to allow self-identifying for transgender women to stand in the Senate elections as females. Is that right? You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News. We're the People's Channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Put in your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
It's 10 a.m. on Monday, 30th of October. Sorry, it's your turn. Yes.
It's my turn,
Your
Andrew.
turn. Get on. Come on.
This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and me, Emily Carver, in for Bev Turner.
Now, tackling the terror threat, sorry about that. Ministers will hold an emergency Cobra meeting today over concerns the Israel-Hamas conflict could accelerate the chance for a terror attack in the UK. We'll have the latest on that.
Senate self-ID. The Welsh Government is expected to allow self-identifying transgender women to stand in Senate elections as females.
Botox ban. The law in England makes it a criminal offence to administer Botox or inject a filler for cosmetic purposes to anyone under 18. No such law exists in Wales, Scotland or Northern Ireland. Can that be right?
And tributes continue. Messages of condolence from around the world are flooding in for Matthew Perry. He was the star of the sitcom Friends. He died sadly, aged 54. And the rumour mill is churning, isn't it? Why is that, Andrew?
That's because a certain GB News presenter has been linked with going into the I'm a Celebrity jungle. Clue, it's not Emily, and it's not me, although you might want to see the back of me. So who is it?
Who is it?
We'll tell you later.
Yes, let us know your thoughts throughout the show. Email us gbviews@gbnews.com, tweet us @gbnews. But first, it's your news headlines with Sophia.
Good morning, it's 1 minute past 10. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. The government will hold an emergency meeting to discuss the threat of terrorism linked to the Israel-Hamas conflict. Anti-Semitic and Islamophobic incidents have increased since the start of October, following the violence in the Middle East. The current threat to the UK is substantial, meaning an attack is likely. Meanwhile, the US President's security advisor says Hamas is preventing Britons from leaving Gaza. Jake Sullivan says Egypt and Israel are prepared to allow foreign nationals to leave through the Rafah crossing, but the terrorist group has not agreed to it. There are around 200 UK nationals in Gaza. The Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, says the government is working to prevent the conflict widening.
There is a risk that this escalates and spreads across the region. It is in nobody's interest for that to happen. I've spoken extensively with the political leadership in all the countries around Israel's border, including with Lebanon, and we are working to try and make sure that this does not become a regional conflict.
People in Gaza continue to face air and artillery bombardment as Israel's ground offensive into the Strip continues. Israeli tanks and troops are pressing into the enclave, with the Israel Defense Forces saying it's hit more than 600 military targets in the past few days. Airstrikes have reportedly hit near Gazan hospitals, with Israel accusing Hamas of locating command centres and military infrastructure in medical facilities. The Palestinian Red Crescent says it's been warned by Israeli authorities to immediately evacuate the Al-Quds hospital in Gaza City, where 14,000 people are being sheltered. AI tools will be rolled out in classrooms across England. That's according to the Prime Minister. Rishi Sunak says the technology will help reduce teachers' workloads, with AI designing lesson plans and quizzes. It's part of a £2 million investment in new classroom technology, which is equivalent to employing around 40 teachers. Ministers claim the funding will allow for personalised AI assistance in every classroom. More wet weather is set to bring disruption to several parts of the country ahead of the arrival of Storm Ciarán later this week. Heavy rain is expected in southern and southeast England, as well as Northern Ireland. The Environment Agency has issued 72 flood warnings ahead of the storm on Wednesday night. Storm Ciarán will be strong winds and heavy rain to southern parts of England and Wales. Met Office says there's a small chance that homes and businesses could be flooded, causing damage to some buildings. Just Stop Oil activists will hear High Court judges' ruling on M25 protests. They've been accused of being in contempt after climbing onto a gantry in November last year. One of the 12 activists appearing in court is a 76-year-old woman from Bristol. She told the judge that the climate emergency is not taken seriously enough and that she's worried about her grandchildren's future. But National Highways lawyers told the judge the protesters caused considerable delays for motorists. Britain's public services risk getting stuck in a state of crisis. That's according to the Institute for Government, which says public services are becoming worse for people than before the pandemic, and much worse since Conservatives came to power. IFG says it's caused by funding cuts, lack of capital investment, and disruption caused by strikes. The think tank also warned that the current spending plans, which Labour will stick to if it wins the next election, mean more services will deteriorate further. Several single-use plastics will no longer be sold in Wales as new measures come into force. Items like polystyrene cups and takeaway food containers and single-use plastic cutlery are now being banned from being sold. The legislation brings Wales in line with similar bans in England and Scotland. Climate Change Minister Julie James says it'll help create a greener future for generations to come. Friends creators say Matthew Perry's death seems impossible after he was found dead in a hot tub at his Los Angeles home on Saturday. The actor was best known for playing Chandler Bing on the American sitcom Friends. It comes as the US media reports his initial post-mortem results are inconclusive and the cause of death is yet to be determined. Showbiz expert Kinsey Schofield told GB News further investigations have been requested, including a toxicology report.
Those can take weeks, sometimes up to months to get those results back. But what we are hearing from Page Six is that the core cast of Friends is currently working on a joint statement they can release. According to sources, they are reeling about the death of Matthew Perry.
This is GB News across the UK, on TV, in your car, on your digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now is back to Andrew and Emily.
Well, let's see what you've been saying at home, because lots of emails and texts coming in on Israel and also the migrant barge. Alex says British politicians have helped destabilise Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Libya, and they have got blinkers on when it comes to the USA and Israel's killing of civilians.
Yes, but Mike, he's written in, he's concerned about the hatred towards Jewish people that we're seeing in some areas. He says, can someone explain why there is so much hatred towards the Jews these days in this country? There doesn't seem to be any obvious reason. People seem to be living in the dark ages. It does appear as though, unfortunately, anti-Semitism is rearing its ugly head.
Certainly has. And people also talking about the migrant barge. Keith says, oh, charming, these scroungers should be intense like they are in France with no benefits, then they might stop coming. That's not going to happen.
But Gary says, shouldn't the No to the Barge campaign be renamed Not in My Backyard? That's actually quite a good point, because you can be vehemently against the barge in your area, but where are the migrants, the asylum seekers, supposed to go?
And the local Tory MP is a great supporter of the government policy of shipping the refugees to Rwanda, but he doesn't want the barge in his constituency. Not in my backyard, isn't that right,
and
Tory MP?
So many MPs, Tory MPs, who have come out. I think David Davis, for example, came out vehemently against the Rwanda policy, but then he also campaigned against a migrant hotel in his constituency.
He did.
So it is not in my backyard, isn't it?
Yeah, and this will also apply when Labour win the next election, which I think they will, and they decide they're going to be able to do house building the way the Tories couldn't, because they're going to stop the NIMBYism. They're not going to be able to.
No.
They're just not going to be able to, because the MPs are the voice of the NIMBYism.
People ask, what is British culture? Well, perhaps NIMBYism is a part of it. But anyway, the government will hold an emergency meeting to discuss the threat of terrorism linked to the Israel-Hamas conflict.
Smart Rowley, he's the Commissioner of the Met, warns that the events in the Middle East are having a serious knock-on effect in Britain, where 5 people were charged at the weekend at a pro-Palestinian protest. Well, Chris Blackhurst joins us now in the studio. He is the former editor of The Independent. He and I go back too many years. Long time,
Donkey's
Chris.
years.
Donkey's years, as my father would say. We want to talk to you about your book, which is causing quite a lot of stir, a big stir in the world of football. But first, I want to talk to you about what's happening politically. This is turning into a real problem for Sir Keir Starmer, what's happening in the Middle East, because they've decided so far not to discipline any front benches who are not backing the line of who are calling for an immediate ceasefire. But I'm told that there's lots of people in his shadow cabinet now who do not agree with Starmer's position.
That's absolutely right. I mean, I think, I was told 13.
Right.
13 members of his shadow team don't agree with his position. You have to remember, I mean, it's only where are we now? It was only in 2018 that the Labour conference was full of Palestine flags.
Remember?
Those people have not gone
That's
away.
right.
Jeremy Corbyn is no longer leader.
Yeah.
In that sense, he's gone away. But those people haven't.
Yeah.
There's an underlying support for the Palestinian cause within Labour. And for Starmer, this is a huge, huge problem. I mean, it's akin to, well, we can go back to those days. It's akin to John Major and the beginnings of the whole Brexit thing, where he had this rump of the Tory party who were refusing to bow to his policy.
Yeah, over things like the Maastricht Treaty, and of course he was famously, John Major, wasn't he? The camera was running, the mics were running, when he referred to some members of his cabinet as people who didn't know the name of their father. I'm not going to use the B word on national television, but he did, and we all remember it. It was Michael Howard, who was the other two? Michael Portillo, and one other, whose name escapes me.
I'm going to say John Redfield, Bill Cash.
Bill Cash, yeah. So, and that the issue of Europe bedevilled the Tory party for the best part of 15 years, till Cameron got the referendum and it came up with the answer he didn't expect.
Yeah, well, he's in exactly the same problem. His big problem is that he is desperate for the Labour Party not to be seen to be anti-Semitic. And that was a slur that stuck. I mean, there was some evidence for it, but it really stuck. So he's now gone...
Under Corbyn in particular, you mean?
Under Corbyn. He's now gone the other way. He doesn't want anti-Semitism at any price. But, of course, there is a price, which is he's seen to be supporting Israel, and that's riling a huge element in his party. And those people, I mean, they're all his... look, I would guess that a lot of those people on the marches and things are natural Labour voters. So he's got to be very careful. How he controls it, I don't know.
If he changes his position and says, OK, I'm going to back a ceasefire, he'll be accused by the Tories of the most egregious U-turn so far, and he's already vulnerable to that criticism, isn't he, Chris, that he keeps U-turning on major issues?
He already has on the siege.
Yeah.
He told one media outlet that he backed Israel's decision to blockade Gaza, and then to another media outlet he said, I didn't say that. So he's already flip-flopping a bit on this. It's extremely difficult for him, isn't it?
Yeah, it is difficult. Well, this is a horrible thing to say, really. What he's got to hope for, I guess, is that this goes on a long time, and there are, sadly, lots of civilians caught up in it, as there are already, but even worse, and demands around the world for ceasefire intensify. Now, I suppose if that happens, he could really attach himself. I mean, there may be a point where even the Conservatives have... I mean, Biden is warning Netanyahu a lot of the time, be careful.
Yeah.
Now, if something... if it really gets a lot worse, and it probably will, then it's possible he can attach himself to that and say, look, we need a ceasefire. But right now, he's in a very, very difficult place.
And Israel will argue, how can we possibly just concentrate our military operation on Hamas when Hamas, we know, use their own people as human shields?
Yeah, Israel has every right to eradicate Hamas. Hamas makes no bones about it. It wants to get rid of Israel. It's not an organisation that negotiates. I mean, that's clear. It does not. It might negotiate over hostages, but generally it's not. It has one ideology, and the ideology is to get rid of Israel. That's it. And therefore, there is no compromise. They have to get rid of them. They're embedded in Gaza. They're among civilians. They're even next to hospitals and things like that. So it's extremely, extremely difficult. Where it ends.
Yeah. Just before we go on to your book, Chris, what about the terror threat here? I mean, I was talking earlier about we saw a lot of people at the march at the weekend. They're entitled to march in terms of course they are, but should they be behind masks? Should they be hiding behind masks?
It's a very good point. I mean, look, I'm old enough, unfortunately, to remember when people marched in support of the IRA.
Yeah.
IRA was a proscribed organisation and people marched in favour of it and sang songs in favour of it. And there weren't many arrests. I mean, there'd be 5 arrests on Saturday. Well, actually, if the figures are correct, there were 100,000 people there. It's not many.
No.
The police are in a very, very difficult place because if they're not careful, it will all kick off and they'll become the targets. So they're standing back. They don't want their officers injured. And it could really, really turn very nasty.
They are very much standing back. I walked through Parliament Square on Saturday. I was at another event. Walked through the police. There were people clambering on traffic lights and letting off those smoke things, and the police just stand and watch. Now that's a decision.
Well, it's an extreme look. It's a very polarised argument. But if you sing, there's a song they sing. From the river to the sea.
Which is eliminating Israel in the process.
Yeah, but it's a song that the Palestinians and their supporters sing.
Some would deny that.
Yeah. Somewhere I think it's called the Shahad, which is the black and white cloth.
Yeah.
Those are pro-Palestinian symbols. And then, of course, you've got the other people who have got paragliders stuck on their backs and all sorts.
Horrible.
How you deal with that, I don't know. I mean, there is talk that the government's going to review, Suella Braverman's going to review. Might be a new offence called implied support for terrorism. But this is now.
Yeah.
And you and I know, we all three of us know how long it takes something to get to the statute book.
Months.
I mean, well, months, years.
But there'll be another government in power by
years. And, of course, it'll wend its way through the Commons. There'll be rows galore. I haven't even mentioned the Lords.
Yeah.
So implied support for terrorism, well, good luck with that.
Now, very difficult with balancing it with freedoms.
Now, I know nothing about football, Chris, but I do know that Manchester United are one of the most, if not the most famous football clubs in the world, and they have been run by a pretty unpopular load of Americans called the Glazer family. You've written this book, the world's biggest catastrophe. Now, there's your 13-amp plug here. Manchester United, the Glazers, and the struggle for football soul. They took it. There was a little. They took a stake. What in about 2003? $5 million. Two years later, they've got 98% of Man U by effectively borrowing against Man United's assets. So this world-famous football club now is in huge debt.
Yeah, that's why I wrote the book. I was fascinated. Look, I'm not a Manchester United fan. I do watch football, but I'm not a Manchester United fan. But what I'm interested in, and always have been, are people who, how can I put this? People who come from nowhere and do incredible things. That's not to laud praise on them. That's really the fact that they came from nowhere. No one in this country had ever heard of them. They're barely known in America. And yet they bought the world's biggest football club. They're the biggest on TikTok, social media, huge fan base, all the legends, Bobby Charlton, George Best, the music crash, everything that goes with Manchester United. These characters bought it. And what's incredible about them is that, I mean, we've just talked about protests, but, you know, the level of protests and abuse that they've sustained, it hasn't budged them at all. I mean, 18 years they've owned the club and they're still there and they're not bothered. I mean, they've got the thickest skins on the planet. I mean, quite incredible. And the club, I mean, the fans, even yesterday, they're playing, Manchester United were playing City in local derby. City won very easily. The fans are in uproar, and so it goes on. And it's fascinating, and it's an amazing story about them.
Yeah, they've not broken any law. But they behave, which is charlatans. What the fans would say, they're charlatans.
Yeah, I mean the key thing for the fans is that, and it's a bit of it is a cliche, I'm afraid, but as far as the fans are concerned, they don't show the love.
Right.
And they don't show the love. They don't turn up at Old Trafford. They're not among the fans. They're distant. They're over in America, and the club is saddled with huge debts. Old Trafford needs repairing, the training ground's falling behind. And don't forget, Manchester United supporters, they don't compare themselves against Rochdale or Basildon. They compare themselves against Bayern Munich and Real Madrid. And Barcelona. They've got fantastic stadiums. They've got the world's best players. So they're looking at their team thinking, well, why haven't we got that?
But why are so many football clubs now in Britain, Premier League clubs, owned by foreign people who know nothing about football?
They've got money.
Very simple. It's quite right. It's money. It's filthy lucre. The TV rights are huge. And don't forget, let's look at, you know, cut to the chase. The Glazers borrowed money to buy the club. They put in about £200 million of their own money, and even that, as I say in the book, was almost certainly borrowed as well. They paid overall 600 or so for the club. They've turned down offers recently approaching £6 billion.
Good Lord.
So £6 billion is what this club is worth. This is not, I mean, this is 11 men, or 11 women if it's the women's team. 11 men, 11 women, you know, chasing a ball around a pitch. That's what football is.
It's ridiculous. That's what football is, Chris.
Even you played football at school and you chased the football around.
If I'd only known, I could have been in a £6 billion industry.
£6 billion.
I once competed in the Middlesex Championships.
Oh, there you go.
I think it was five-a-side.
Chris, it sounds a great book. And just finally, Jim Ratcliffe, isn't he Britain's richest man trying to buy the club?
Yeah, he is. But the problem with Jim is that I don't think he's really got enough money to spend. Plus, I think very quickly the Glazers want to hang on to it.
Right. Trophy assets.
There's that old saying they use in the city, you know, when it's gone, it's gone. They don't like, if you sell something, you can't get it back. And they enjoy owning it. And if they can somehow marry the two worlds, get some money from somebody and still have a big share in it, then they'll
Fascinating. People should just support my local football team, Swindon Town. I don't think it's worth £600.
Can you tell this was written by a journalist?
Why?
I don't know. Is there special type of writing when a journalist writes a book like this? Investigation.
Chris, before he was over the Independent, was one of the best investigative journalists in Britain.
Yes, that's why I'm asking.
He's an investigative
stories galore in here.
Found out secrets.
The stories galore.
Oh, there'll be secrets in there.
Stories galore. Roll up.
I'm waiting for the writ from the Glazer brothers, because you're bound to have upset them. And if you haven't, why not? That's Chris Chris Black goes, just remind you that the title of the book is...
The world's biggest cash machine.
Love that.
Manchester United, the Glazers, and the struggle for football soul.
Well, there's a gift for my my brother, perhaps, big Man United fan.
He'll be fascinated by that.
Yes, still to come, the Welsh Government is to redefine women to include transgender females under planned new laws. Does it sound fair to women?
No. We're GB News, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
It's 10:24. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Emily Carver, who's in for Bev Turner.
Yes, the Welsh Government is to redefine the word woman to include transgender females under planned new laws.
So the proposal was revealed yesterday in a leaked draft of its gender quotas bill, which proposes that half the candidates in any list to be members of the Senedd, that's the Welsh Parliament or Welsh Assembly, must be women.
So joining us now is the founder of Standing for Women, Kelly J. Keane. Kelly, thank you for joining us on the show this morning. So they want to change the definition of woman to include The definition will state that transgender, so this is what's included in women, a person who is proposing to undergo, is undergoing or has undergone a process or part of the process for the purpose of reassigning their sex to female.
Oh, gosh, if I could make sense of any single one of those words, I'd be some sort of genius. I mean, you and The Telegraph and various people have talked about transgender females this morning, and I don't know quite what that is either. As far as I'm concerned, when it comes to female, there is one female, that's someone like myself, who was born female and has XX chromosomes. And then there are people who are men who were not born with XX chromosomes, who some of them claim to be women. And so that's what we're talking about. And look, we could get in a situation in Wales where they have this wonderful 50-50 gender, again, some sort of bizarre term which nobody can define, where everybody could have a penis, but they could still claim to be 50-50 men and women. So it's bonkers.
They're effectively trying to create a new definition of a woman, aren't they?
Yeah, effectively. Yeah, I think that, the Welsh government have been on this journey into nonsensical definitions for quite some time. I just read a 7-page document this morning about what non-binary is. So, all bets are off when it comes to just how crazy they might go. I think they're probably going to try and compete with Scotland, which, is going to be fun to watch, although not that fun if you're a woman or a young person living in Wales.
I mean, Kelly J. Keane, I guess the counter is the question, would you prefer transgender women were excluded from candidates' lists if they don't see themselves as a male, they see themselves as a woman, and if they're not allowed on the women's lists, then they can't become a politician?
Well, them's the breaks. If you want to pretend that you're something that you're not, then you can't be included in either list, I guess. That's a choice that you make. As far as I know, there are sort of women-only lists. I don't even agree with such a thing. I think we should live in a meritocracy. But if there are to be women-only lists, I've never heard of a man-only list. So there are open lists and there are women-only lists. And if you're a man who has decided that you're not really a man after all, then you can join the list for everybody. You just can't. You can be anything you want in this country. You just can't be the opposite sex because it's impossible.
So if a man transitions fully, Kelly J, to what he regards now as female status, what would you describe that person as? Would you still say they're still a man?
Well, the same as you did in your question, and I would still call them a man. There's no such thing as transitioning into female status or into a female body or into a woman. Those things might be on somebody's wish list, and I wish them well. I hope they find some sort of peace, but I don't think they will find a woman's body at the end of whatever transition they may seek.
Now, Cathy Larkman, she's quoted in the reports about this. She's the Welsh coordinator of the Women's Rights Network. She says this change would likely see men self-identifying as women to greatly improve their chances of selection and would muscle females out.
Well, look, that's getting into the weeds, really. Basically, men can't be women. And so it doesn't really matter whether some man believes he's doing it just to cheat and get in an election on a shortlist, or whether he has, some real desire to be a woman. Either way, he's not a woman. So we either have women-only shortlists, or we don't. And if we do, they have to mean something. There must be some reason why people have decided it's important that women are represented in Welsh government. And the only way women can be represented is with these quotas. And if that is true, and I'm not saying it is, but if that's your rationale for doing something, then a man who claims to be a woman doesn't have any of those needs, that he won't tick any boxes. He doesn't know what it's like to be a teenage girl. He doesn't know what it's like to live a single day as a woman. So it just doesn't make any sense. If you want representation, why on earth would you pick somebody who can't possibly know what it's like to be representative of the population they claim?
Well, of course, Mark Drakeford has he's argued for a long time, hasn't he, that transgender women are women.
Yeah, he's standing down, I think, quite soon. Not soon enough.
I'm not comfortable with the idea of women's shortlists anyway, really, and the idea of quotas, and then to have this whole debate. Thank you very much for joining us, Kelly J. Keane, there, founder of Standing for Women. Thank you for your time.
And a voice of common sense.
Yes, in this mad world.
In this mad world. And I do not understand why we don't get more people in the government taking on this madness. Because they should. They did it in Scotland over the gender reform bill there. They challenged it. They should be challenging what's happening in Wales, because it will not be popular.
That was a real eye-opener, wasn't it, what happened in Scotland?
Yeah, and I think it hastened the departure of Nicola Sturgeon.
Absolutely.
As First Minister.
Absolutely.
She was so completely out of touch on that issue.
She would deny that, of
She
course.
would.
She just needed a break.
Yeah, she can come on and talk about it if she'd like to. She doesn't like me at all. Fine.
That doesn't surprise me, Andrew.
No.
But still to come this morning.
Yeah, Botox ban. And the law in England makes it a criminal offence to administer Botox or inject a filler for cosmetic purposes to anyone under 18. No such law exists in Wales, Scotland or Northern Ireland. Should it?
Yes, so people are going to Wales to get their injections at the moment. Anyway, barge...
And to change their sex, presumably.
Barge access denied. 2 Labour MPs are going to Portland today to meet asylum seekers living on the Bivvy Stockholm, but they were not given permission to go on board from the Home Secretary.
Good for her. That and much more after your morning news with Sophia.
It's 10:32. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. The government is holding an emergency meeting to discuss the threat of terrorism linked to the Israel-Hamas conflict. Police and national security officials are also taking part in the Cobra meeting at the Downing Street. It follows a rise in anti-Semitic and Islamophobic incidents during demonstrations across the country. The UK's current terror threat level stands at substantial, meaning an attack is likely. Meanwhile, Gaza continues to face air and artillery bombardment as Israel's offensive into the Strip continues. Israeli tanks and troops are pressing into the enclave, with the Israel Defense Forces saying more than 600 terrorist targets have been hit in the past few days. Airstrikes have reportedly hit near Gazan hospitals, with Israel accusing Hamas of locating command centres and military infrastructure in medical facilities. The Palestinian Red Crescent says it has been warned by Israeli authorities to immediately evacuate the Al-Quds hospital in Gaza City, where 14,000 people are being sheltered. The Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, says the government is working to prevent the conflict from widening.
There is a risk that this escalates and spreads across the region. It is in nobody's interest for that to happen. I've spoken extensively with the political leadership in all the countries around Israel's border, including with Lebanon, and we are working to try and make sure that this does not become a regional conflict.
In other news, artificial intelligence tools will be rolled out in classrooms across England. The Prime Minister says the technology will help reduce teachers' workloads, with AI designing lesson plans and quizzes. It's part of a £2 million investment in new classroom technology, which is equivalent to employing around 40 teachers. And you can get more on all those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
For stunning gold and silver coins you'll always value, Rosland Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2138 and €1.1465. The price of gold is £1,645 and 74 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 7,350 points.
Rosland Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
We're back on air. Still to come, the Labour...
We were gossiping.
The Labour Civil War rumbles on. We'll get the thoughts of broadcaster Mike Parry and former Labour MP Stephen Pound. That should be fun. This is Britain's Newsroom. We're on GB News. Stay with us.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
And it's 10:38 with Britain's News, and we're on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Emily Carver. It's in for Bev Turner.
Yes, the law in England makes it a criminal offence to administer Botox or inject a filler for cosmetic purposes to anyone under 18, but no such law exists in Wales, Scotland or Northern Ireland.
So Sophie Reaper is going to tell us more about this.
The pressure to look perfect has never been higher as the beauty industry continues to develop new techniques. Social media provides a constant platform for people to follow the latest trends.
At 18, when I was going to any person that was doing an offer on Instagram, actually I had more filler in my face. I don't regret it because now I can talk about it. I just wish that I had done more research and not used Instagram as a research tool.
Since appearing in Love Island, Faye has begun campaigning to have better standards across the beauty industry, including regulations surrounding under 18s.
I know there's a lot of younger people out there getting these works done as little as 18, 17, you know. Every time I've ever been before now and before what I'm campaigning for, I've never been ID'd. No one ever asked me to prove my age when I went. A big frown down.
Jane began her career in aesthetics back in 2008. Since then, she's noticed a huge spike in the number of young people who want work done to alter their appearance.
They're seeing these unrealistic expectations and they're thinking that they can book in and have a filler treatment and look like their idols. One of the worrying things about that is, the increase in body dysmorphic disorder.
Amid growing concerns for young people, a law was passed in England in 2021 to prevent under-18s having injectable enhancements.
Most registered professionals wouldn't be treating patients under the age of 18 anyway. We know that younger people can make poor choices, are less able to make balanced decisions about what they want.
Here in England, if you're under the age of 18, then legally you aren't able to have cosmetic procedures such as Botox or filler. However, if you take a short stroll up the road and cross the border into Wales, you'll suddenly find the law is very different. Just 6 minutes down the road from Jane's business is another clinic offering similar services. However, because of simple geography, the regulations it's held to are vastly different. Legally, they would be able to treat under 18s, but because of ethical reasons, they've always refused to do so.
Safety, to me, is the number one priority. We've always been against it, but certainly there are clinics around the area that do treat those young people and do enhance their features with such things as lips and cheek fillers and, freeze their faces with Botox. And the Welsh Government should be not just regulating the age, but they should be regulating who should be allowed to do these treatments.
So far, England is the only country in the UK to make it illegal for under 18s to have this kind of procedure. But as concerns grow, some people are questioning whether it's time for others to take a stand and change their laws too. Sophie Reaper, GB News.
Yes, I wonder, should we get a little bit of Botox, a little bit of filler?
Well, I think we should ask our panellists here. We've got Stephen Pound, the former Labour MP, and Mike Parry, the broadcaster. Stephen Pound, have you had Botox?
No, I haven't. I have to say that if you ever see a cement lorry pulled up outside my house and a massive, great cement mixer, you'll know that I'm due for a bit.
Right, so due for a bit of Botox. I think that's what you're referring to. Mike?
Due for a bit of Botox, yeah. No, of course not. Why would I? I've got what many women, who I've known over the years describe my face as the lived-in face, OK?
Yeah.
So if you've got a lived-in face, that means it's full of character and it shows the life that you've led. Why would you want to disguise it? I don't get the Botox thing at all, because I've had a look behind this legislation, and we were just talking off air there about the trout pout.
Yeah.
Apparently, you can still get the trout pout at 16.
Terrible.
Everything else is 18 in England. You get trout pout. And now you've seen the results of some of these trout pouts.
Yeah.
These poor women. Do you remember when we were kids? You used to buy like licorice that was red, shaped like lips, and stick it in your mouth.
We did.
And go and pretend to your mum, look, I've got red lips. And that's what real ones look like now with the old trout pout. I think people are self-harming themselves.
But Mike, I mean, a lot of this comes from the likes of Kylie Jenner. She's one of the Kardashian clans, and she's built $1 billion empire off the back of her lip fillers, essentially. She had lip fillers and she sold lip gloss, and she's made a massive business in makeup and now clothing and everything else. But she lied for a while to her followers and said, oh no, I haven't had any lip fillers, it's just overlining my lips and this. And of course, then she had to admit she had them. But meanwhile, I'm sure so many young girls across the world thinking that they need lip fillers.
Do you know what I
think
the problem is there? Is that because she's a billionaire, she'll have the best cosmetic surgeons in the world do it properly. These poor young girls in Wigan who want to imitate it, go and see some backstreet cosmetic surgeon who pumps any load of rubbish into their lips and literally can kill them. We've heard, haven't we, of women who go for what they call a bum lift, which is a similar sort of cosmetic operation, and they literally die because of the poisons put in their body.
Well, Stephen, where does it come from? This is almost pathological, isn't it? Look, if you've got somebody who's 16 who actually feels that they want to have a butt lift and go to Brazil and have an exploding bum out of it, or have all this Botox.
They don't always explode, we must say that.
No, but, one exploding exploding bum is one too many, I have to say.
It is.
Particularly if you sit behind her on the plane. But look, the reality is, where does it stop? And this is the problem. I've known a few people who've got this, and they start with a little bit here, a little bit there, and before you know where you are, they just basically completely plastic Barbie.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, I tell you, I'm sorry, Andrew, you can see over the years, as they try to keep age away and catch up with younger actresses, the face literally starts changing shape, doesn't it?
Yeah. But Cher looks OK, doesn't she? I mean, Cher has had a bit.
But what is in the psyche of a 17-year-old that she, because it's normally girls, to be fair, want to go and have these lips blown up?
Well, you know, and
why don't their parents stop them?
Well, in many cases, this is what this legislation is all about, because, I mean, the parents can't stop them in a lot of cases. But look, in a lot of cases, they will actually see someone they buy, like the Kardashians, and it's that sort of peer
role
pressure.
model.
And precisely so. But it's delusional. And I think it's actually a pathology.
So should Wales and Scotland be bringing it into line with England? 18? I think 21 would be better.
I do.
I mean,
18 is too young.
I do. And also...
You're still at school at 18.
I totally agree. For all the Kate Kardashians we've got in the world, they don't advocate to young people, do what I'm doing and all that. But people like Kate Winslet, Oscar-winning actress, has never had any Botox. She's on record and said, I've never done it. I wish she'd come forward and say that publicly to save these, so that young girls know you don't always have to have Botox to keep up with the best.
Well, there you go. Mike Parry tells the nation you don't need to have Botox to be beautiful.
Yeah, and you don't need to have Botox to look like Stephen Pound. Not that you'd want to look like Stephen Pound, particularly.
It's like that 25 people living in it.
Let's talk about the Labour Party. Your leader has a problem.
No, he doesn't.
Yes, he does.
Andrew, you've been around the block a few times. You remember what it was like.
I'd say.
Thank you, gentlemen.
You remember what it was like under Tony Blair.
It's like lads' banter on it.
We were all accused of being robots on message. We had these pagers, and saying breathe in, breathe out. And we were all agonising on message.
John Major and the Tories. John Major and the Tories, this is the problem you've got potentially here. It bedevilled them for years. You thought you'd got rid of the pro-Palestinian lobby with Corbyn and the flags. It's huge in the Labour Party.
It isn't huge in the Labour Party.
It is.
On the day that we had 2 brand new MPs come into the House of Commons, I think we had about 20 councillors go out the door. And look, the fact is that the Labour Party actually encourages and allows different views. We're not robots. We're not all on message.
You lost control of Oxford Council.
Yeah. Well, we only held it by about 7 in the first place. Yeah.
Because of a foreign conflict, you've lost control of a council.
But do you honestly think that the people in Oxford, who should actually be concentrating on keeping the streets clean, getting the bins emptied, what's happening in Palestine, Israel, is that really of total relevance?
No, it shouldn't be.
Chris Blackhurst was on with us earlier. He's the former editor of The Independent. He's pretty well plugged in politically. He says there are 13 members of the Shadow Cabinet who are deeply, deeply unhappy with Keir Starmer's position of not supporting an immediate ceasefire.
It wouldn't surprise me at all. You see, I don't think it's even the worldwide issue that we're talking about here. I think it's Keir Starmer's own position in Labour here. For instance, Shabana Mahmood, Shadow Justice Secretary, so she's one of the front benches you're talking about, writes a letter to a constituent in Ladywood, Birmingham. I understand your immense distress, and to which she was referring to Keir Starmer's interview on LBC when he said, yes, Israel have got every right to cut off the water, the medical and the supplies that they need. That's the only way they can fight it. Now he's having to backtrack on that. So it's his position that's really questioned.
Let's get a couple of things straight. 90% of the water in Gaza, comes actually from desalination plants. Israel provides about 10% of the water. So that simply isn't that. And the other thing is, if we had a time-out, do you honestly think that a time-out, a ceasefire, would actually do anybody any good? It would allow Hamas time to rearm, and there's no chance of the IDF saying, yes, we're going to actually step back for a bit, give you a couple
So why are so many of your colleagues calling for it?
Because I disagree with them.
Why are so many calling for
it?
Because they don't like the state of Israel.
Yeah, I think we should be talking about humanitarian aid, and that's where Keir Starmer could be making the point. The idea that we can simply have a time-out to allow them to regroup and rearm is pure.
Mike, don't you agree with it? A lot of this is about a lot of Labour MPs' antipathy to the state of Israel.
Of course it is. It's hatred of Israel. I don't hear too many Labour MPs speaking up about the marches in London when these marchers are using that expression, from the river to the sea. From the river to the sea means wipe out Israel and 9 million people who live there. It is an explicit wish to get rid of Jewish people in the Middle East, and they don't speak up against that.
I've spoken to a lot of people who say, no, that's not what it means.
It does mean that, honestly. What else can it mean? Yeah. If they mean get rid of the area between the River Jordan and the Mediterranean...
That means Israel disappears.
Exactly.
Well,
off the face of
I agree with you, but people continue to refute that.
Yeah. Well, at the Labour Party conference, the best attended fringe event, this a couple of weeks ago, was the Labour Friends of Israel. There were people queuing round the block for it. There are plenty of people. And don't forget, it was until very recently the kibbutz movement in Israel was considered to be the great advantage of sort of practical socialist living. You know, we were incredibly pro-Israeli. It was only when the West Bank annexations took place that things started to change a bit. But I think the idea that you can have differing views within a political party is a sign of a political party in good health.
But there's no common policy within the Labour Party towards this crisis in the Middle East, which could escalate, with Iran already rattling their sabres this morning. The other issue is, even if you let supplies in on a limited basis, they will be taken by Hamas.
They will.
Hamas want to fund their own operations underground. They don't care about the hospital above ground.
And when the President of the United States says to Israel, you've got to make sure the war is concentrated on military targets, how can they do that when Hamas use their own people, Stephen, as human shields?
You can't do that from the air. And this is the absolute agony of it. This is like Fallujah, you remember, with all the underground tunnels in Iraq. And it's like Vietnam. You know, it's a terrifying situation. There will be collateral damage, and I think that is the horror of this particular thing. But you cannot have a precise, exactly targeted response in this particular case.
No, you can't. But the cowards of Hamas not only work in underground tunnels, 300 miles of underground tunnels in an area the size of the Isle of Wight,
It's bigger than the London Underground.
It is. You're absolutely right. But because Hamas don't wear uniforms, we don't know how many of the 7,700 casualties so far are citizens or members of Hamas or warriors. When the first incursion came on October the 7th, it got, even by Hamas standards, out of hand because a lot of people living in that area, Palestinians, just joined in because the people who started it don't wear uniforms. So they couldn't be, seen to be Hamas warriors, so it was just an incursion. Do you see what I mean?
Right, on that point, we're going to change the subject because if you were invited to go in the jungle, I mean the I'm a Celebrity jungle, would you say yes or no?
I would say, are you absolutely mad?
Well, they would be mad to invite you, it's true.
But chewing on a kangaroo's arse is just not my idea of fun.
Really?
What about you, Mike?
Well, it would depend how much they wanted to pay me.
That's the point, isn't it?
That's exactly the point. Now, I think Nigel Farage, I've read that it could be up to £1 million. I would do it for $1 million.
Yeah,
I would do it for $1 million. And do you know what?
I'd do it for half a million.
With Stephen. Yeah, I think I would as well.
I'd do it for 300,000.
This idea of having spiders in your mouth and kangaroos' testicles and all that, I would simply just cross my fingers, try and blank it out and take the $1 million.
And look, I think Nigel Farage is a far more popular, charismatic figure than Matt Hancock, who was the health secretary during the COVID crisis. But Hancock confounded most of us. He got in the last three.
I turned
the public voted for it.
But doesn't that prove how dopey Matt Hancock was? Because he never really considered what he was doing. No. Whereas Nigel Farage, this is a measured sort of step on life. And
I was at the Tory conference this year, and Nigel Farage was without doubt the most popular figure there. He was, wherever he went, it was crowds.
Well, he's probably the most influential politician in this country in the last 20 years, if you think about it.
I do.
You know, he's of the stature of maybe Thatcher and Blair.
And if he went in the jungle, I think it would enhance his popularity even more.
I don't think so. I think people would say this is him getting out while he can and trying to get a pension.
I agree with that. I think his political career, a serious political career, would have to be over if he did the jungle. And, I mean, look, we see him nightly at 7 o'clock, and when I switch on, he looks so smart, you know what I mean? He'll tie, white shirt and all that. And to me, he ekes authority. Do you see what I mean? When he starts speaking, I think, this is authoritative. He knows what he's talking about. He's spoken to the right people. I'm not sure if he'd be treated like that after the jungle.
He'd certainly be more popular than a certain Hancock.
Yes.
As we said, a low bar.
Well, thank you, Stephen Powell and Mike Parry.
Nigel will be on later and he can tell us if he's joining the jungle or not, because we don't know.
He'll play his cards close to his chest.
Of course he will. Yeah.
Well, in the next few minutes, we're going to be discussing the COVID inquiry. But first, it's your weather.
Good morning, my name's Rachel Ayres and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast brought to you by the Met Office. So we saw plenty of rain and showers throughout the weekend and not a huge amount of change as we go into the new week. Heavy showers that could be thundery across southern parts of Wales and England as we go through this morning, with that overnight rain having cleared away from Scotland and northeast England. Some sunny spells around as well, especially across Scotland and central and eastern parts of England. And it'll feel pretty pleasant here, especially away from the coast where those winds are a little bit lighter. So highs of 14 to 16 in the south, though a little bit cooler in the north with those northerly winds. Now, as we go through this afternoon, we'll see further showers continuing, but this band of showers will become a little bit more organised into this evening and bringing some heavy and persistent rain to Northern Ireland. So there could be some disruption here. Plenty of clear spells, though, ahead of this, especially across southern England and Scotland. And a bit of a chilly night across Scotland as well. Could be a touch of frost in some sheltered rural spots. So to start Tuesday then, we'll see this band of organised showers making its way very slowly northeastwards. So driest conditions to the northeast of this with the best of the sunshine across Scotland. A little bit of respite from the showers across the southwest before this next system makes its way in as we go into Tuesday afternoon. And still feeling pretty pleasant in the sunshine. Always cooler though across Scotland with those northerly winds bringing that cooler air.
Well, still to come, beer campaigners are urging the Chancellor to rescue the industry by cutting taxes before it's too late. How much longer can our pubs hang on? This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with the People's Channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth. It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
It's 11 a.m. on Monday the 30th of October. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Emily Carver in for Bev Turner.
Yes, tackling the terror threat. Ministers will hold an emergency Cobra meeting today over concerns that Israel-Hamas conflict could accelerate the chance of a terror attack in the UK.
And Labour's civil war. Sir Keir Starmer, the party leader, faces growing pressure from his own MPs to back a ceasefire in Gaza as resignations in the party continue.
And tributes continue. Messages of condolence from around the world are flooding in for Matthew Perry. Was the star of the sitcom Friends. He's died sadly, aged 54. And as ever, we'd love to know what you think on all of our stories. Let us know. Email us, gbviews@gbnews.com, or tweet us at gbnews. But first, let's get the news headlines with Sophia.
Good morning, it's 11 o'clock. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. The government is holding an emergency meeting to discuss the threat of terrorism linked to the Israel-Hamas conflict. Cabinet ministers, including the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, have been joined by Met Police Commissioner Sir Mark Rowley. The Prime Minister is also expected to speak to national security officials. It follows a rise in anti-Semitic and Islamophobic incidents across the country since the start of October. The UK's current terror threat stands at substantial, which means an attack is likely. People in Gaza continue to face air and artillery bombardment as Israel's ground offensive into the Strip continues. Israeli tanks and troops are pressing into the enclave, with the Israeli Defense Forces saying it's hit more than 600 military targets in the past few days. Airstrikes have reportedly hit near Gazan hospitals, with Israel accusing Hamas of hiding military infrastructure in medical facilities. The Palestinian Red Crescent says it has been warned by Israeli authorities to immediately evacuate the Al-Quds hospital, where 14,000 people are being sheltered. The Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, says the government is working to prevent the conflict from widening.
There is a risk that this escalates and spreads across the region. It is in nobody's interest for that to happen. I've spoken extensively with the political leadership in all the countries around Israel's border, including with Lebanon, and we are working to try and make sure that this does not become a regional conflict.
AI tools will be rolled out in classrooms across England. That's according to the Prime Minister. Rishi Sunak says the technology will help reduce teachers' workloads, with AI designing lesson plans and quizzes. It's part of a £2 million investment in new classroom technology, which is the equivalent of employing around 40 teachers. Ministers claim the funding will allow for a personalised AI assistant in every classroom. More wet weather is set to bring disruption to several parts of the country ahead of the arrival of Storm Ciarán later this week. Heavy rain is expected in southern and southeast England, as well as Northern Ireland. The Environment Agency has issued 72 flood warnings ahead of the storm on Wednesday night. Storm Ciarán will bring strong winds and heavy rain to southern parts of England and Wales. Met Office says there's a small chance that homes and businesses could be flooded, causing damage to some buildings. Just Stop Oil activists will hear a High Court judge's ruling on M25 protests. They've been accused of being in contempt after climbing onto a gantry in November last year. One of 12 activists appearing in the court is a 76-year-old woman from Bristol. She's told the judge that the climate emergency is not taken seriously enough and that she's worried about her grandchildren's future. But National Highways lawyers told the judge that protesters cause considerable delays for motorists. Britain's public services risk getting stuck in a state of crisis. That's according to the Institute for Government, which says public services are performing worse than before the pandemic and much worse since Conservatives came to power. IFG says it's caused by funding cuts, lack of capital investment and disruption caused by strikes. The think tank also warns that current spending plans, which Labour will stick to if it wins the next election, means more services will deteriorate further. HSBC reported more than double pre-tax profit of £6.4 billion between July and September. That's a £3.7 billion increase compared with the same period last year. The banking giant is crediting the impact of higher interest rates, but the company says its expenses also grew by 2%, were driven higher technology costs and rising inflation. Several single-use plastics will no longer be sold in Wales as new measures come into force. Items like polystyrene cups and takeaway food containers and single-use plastic cutlery are now being banned from being sold. The legislation brings Wales in line with similar bans in England and Scotland. Climate Change Minister Julie James says it'll help create a greener future for generations to come. This is GB News across the UK, on TV, in your car, on your digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now it's back to Andrew and Emily.
Well, welcome back to Britain's Newsroom with me, Emily Carver, in for Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We've got lots of emails coming in, don't we?
Yes, we do. Lots of people, of course, still very exercised by what's happening in Gaza. Calvin says these people who are marching for the Palestinians in London, if they like them so much, why don't they move back there? Well, actually, lots of people who took part in that march weren't from Palestine, of course. They're people who just have legitimate concerns about what's happening, and I support their right to demonstrate. What I don't support their right to do is start chanting jihad slogans, urging holy war, and those appalling women who had the
paragliders on their backs. Yeah, I think actually they have been identified. Perhaps we can get that fact checked, but I think they've been identified, and I think the police have intervened. So that's good, at least, because that should not be allowed. That is
Absolutely
certainly
not.
glorifying a terrorist organisation in this country.
I'm afraid they've got to take the masks off.
Yeah, you're passionate about the masks.
I think what they're hiding behind. Why are they hiding behind the masks?
It's very intimidating, I must say.
If you're proud to take part in a legitimate democratic protest and demonstration, let's see who you are.
Yeah, and Andy makes the point that the threat of terrorism may be linked to our porous borders and the fact we let extremists wander through. Yes, of course.
Undeniable, I'm afraid.
I think it is. I think it is, Andy. Of course, some would dispute that, but we have evidence.
Yeah,
plenty.
We do. Migrant barge interesting. Neil says, I note that the two Labour MPs weren't too worried when UK workers lived aboard the Bibby Stockholm when it was berthed in Shetland for 4 years. It was used as a base for workers. It was. That's absolutely right.
It was. And now, what was it they called it? They've called it, what have they called the barge? Well, a prison.
Yeah.
But they also used a different term this week. I can't remember.
Well, John sums it up. John says free board and lodging, free heating, access to doctors, dentists and pocket money as well. Where do we pensioners apply, please? John, I feel absolute sympathy and support for what you're saying.
Yes, well, and Steve said it should not be in anyone's backyard. We were discussing whether this is a case of NIMBYism.
I put it in those two Labour MPs' backyard.
Yes.
They can have the...
Well, maybe, and then they can deal with their constituents
They can.
not liking it. Because that's the problem. It's very easy to grandstand when it's the Tory government implementing something, but you have to listen to your constituents, and I doubt they would want the barge there either.
Absolutely certain they wouldn't.
If it were possible.
Now, ministers, as we speak, are holding an emergency COBRA meeting today over concerns the Israel-Gaza conflict could accelerate the threat of terrorism on our very streets.
Yes, so we're now joined by senior political correspondent of The Guardian, Aubrey Allegretti. Thank you very much indeed. Yes, the papers are reporting that we're going to have this COBRA meeting, Suella Braverman and the police, security, etc. What can you tell us?
So we know that there's going to be a meeting of COBRA, which is known as the sort of government's emergency committee. It's really a forum to get the most senior people concerned on a particular topic of national emergency around the table to make sure that information is dispersed very quickly and that decisions can be taken very quickly as well. So we understand the Prime Minister is likely to be there, the Home Secretary, certainly Suella Braverman, and police chiefs as well. What they're mostly concerned about is the sort of spillover effect of what's happened between Israel and Hamas in the UK. Now, the terror threat here is substantial at the moment, but security services are said to have been looking at that for at least a week, considering raising it to either severe or critical. That, I think, is the main point of consideration coming out of this meeting, whether or not the terror threat potentially looks like it might move.
Are we right in thinking that ministers have so far rejected the idea of new laws? Because Mark Rowley, the police commissioner, he suggested that the law might need to be changed in order to crack down on extremism.
Yeah, there's an interesting disagreement really between the sort of police who are supposed to deal with the application of the law and the politicians who are, of course, the ones who write it. And there's been particular consternation among some ministers about the police dealing with protesters who have been chanting jihad. Now, the police say that the current sort of law is unclear, that jihad can mean several things, and therefore when it comes to extremism, it's very hard to judge. And they will ultimately be the ones who decide if people are breaking the law or not. And if they think that they're not breaking the law, then they won't arrest them. Ministers have been unhappy with that decision. So the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, is said to be looking at tweaks to existing legislation. Michael Gove, the Community Secretary, is also apparently, we're told in the papers today, looking at a new non-statutory definition of extremism to come into force by the end of the year. So it's quite a slow process. There are obviously protests that happened over the weekend and look set to continue, given the continuing situation in the Middle East. Whether or not ministers and the police can come to a sort of agreement or solution that stems these issues before something potentially comes to a head, that's unclear.
Isn't Sir Mark Rowley, Aubrey here, passing the buck in a sense, saying, oh, well, jihad can have this meaning or it can have that meaning? Look, he's the senior copper. He's got to make a decision. You can't be running off to a Home Secretary asking her or he to make an operational decision for a serving Chief Constable. He's got to make a decision. If people use the word jihad in this current climate and context, they're going to be locked up or arrested. Shouldn't he make that decision rather than saying we may need legislation which, as you point out, can take a very long time?
It seems as though he has sort of made the decision, if you like, and it's the politicians pushing back on him that has forced him into this corner. And he's effectively said to them, well, look, if you don't like our operational decision, then you hold the sort of levers. Right. You are the ones in control of what we're able to do. We make the decisions. If you don't like those decisions, then you need to change the law to toughen us up.
Aubrey, it's been a difficult few days for Keir Starmer. He had a bit of a PR disaster at the South Wales Islamic Centre. He's then had numerous councillors expressing their dismay and disagreement with his policy or with what he's saying about the Israel-Gaza conflict, namely his support for Israel and its right to defend itself. Also, Andy Burnham, Sadiq Khan and others very much defying his position. What's going to happen next?
Yeah, it's very interesting. There is a frustration, I think, that runs through Labour like a stick of rock on this issue. It extends right the way up from sort of community centres, lots of councillors, all the way to the shadow cabinet. And there was a shadow cabinet source I was speaking to over the weekend who just said the current situation is completely unsustainable. People are working behind the scenes to try and shift Keir Starmer's position, which so far has been to align himself completely with the UK government and, of course, the US, Washington as well, in calling for these temporary pauses to fighting so that aid can be allowed through in very specific circumstances for certain times, certain durations and in certain places. But there is still a growing frustration. Keir Starmer is lucky in a sense that Parliament is prorogued, which means that he wouldn't be doing this evening what he normally does at 6 p.m. on a Monday evening, which is facing the Parliamentary Labour Party. Those have usually been sort of very convivial affairs where Labour MPs have had very little to sort of criticise their leader for. But I think had he been going into that committee room this Monday evening, he would have been facing a barrage of anger from MPs who really want Keir Starmer and the Labour teams to soften their position and call for a ceasefire.
If he does move that way, Aubrey, is the risk then that he's seen as U-turning on a really, really huge international issue just months before a general election? The Tories have already calling him hindsight and attacking all the U-turns. Can he really risk this U-turn? Is that what is defining whether he does or he doesn't, how it's going to be played by the Tories, which is frankly a pretty appalling place to be if that is what's motivating his decision-making process?
There's certainly some truth that politically it's very difficult for him to manoeuvre. I think it would be hard too much to describe it as a U-turn because it's a very sort of moving situation, and so it might be at one point appropriate for there to be a ceasefire called, and at one point another. So I think that's what's in Lotto's mind at the moment, the leader of the opposition's office. They know that there are lots of people uncomfortable, not just voters, but those in the Parliamentary Labour Party as well, right up to the shadow cabinet. And Keir Starmer has sought to show complete cross-party support so that other countries know that were he to sweep into office on general election day next year, likely, that he would be behind them, and that the UK's resolve in being supportive of the West sort of coalition would not be changed. That's very important to him as a sort of person seeking to present himself as a statesman in waiting. But whether or not he can really sort of marry that position with the growing pressure in his own party looks increasingly difficult for him.
There's more of those MPs sympathetic to Jeremy Corbyn's position. I'm not saying they would call Hamas friends like Corbyn did foolishly, but quite a lot more who are sympathetic to Corbyn's position, perhaps, than Keir Starmer would like us to have known.
I think it's certainly true that they suspect that this is where we might end up, that they're sort of trying to get ahead of the rowing that's going on right now, and they think that ultimately the position that the UK and the West will be in is calling for a ceasefire. So what they see is really trying to sort of get ahead of the violence and the bloodshed and advocate for a position they think is inevitable.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Aubrey Allegretti, their senior political correspondent at The Guardian newspaper. I wonder if Keir Starmer's going to sanction Andy McDonald, MP, the Corbynite who was at the rally.
I think he'll be reluctant to, because it may transpire other MPs have used the same expression, referring to from the sea to, what is the expression?
From the river to the sea. And
there may be others who have said it, or this could be put in WhatsApp groups. And what he doesn't want to do is have a mass purge on an issue where I don't think he's on the side of the majority of his own party.
Yes.
That's
that is the difficulty.
He's
kept a lid on it.
Yeah.
He's kept a lid on it, and this has changed things.
Yeah, on when he was fighting against the anti-Semitism under Corbyn, so he had the party with him, but I don't think he has got the party on this, which is why I think he will be reluctant to get into any form of purge, because it could horribly backfire.
Well, we'll keep you updated on what happens within the Labour Party, but senior officials from Number 10 are set to give evidence today over the COVID inquiry, which could be a potentially damning week for the government, really.
The hearings begin today with Martin Reynolds, he was a senior civil servant, followed by Imran Shafi, who was former private secretary to the Prime Minister for Public Services.
Yes, we're joined now by our London reporter, Lisa Hartle, who has the latest for us. Lisa, what is the latest?
So after 4 months of hearings, this week is when we're going to hear from some of the government's most senior staff on exactly what happened behind closed doors at Downing Street during the pandemic. So as you said, right now, Martin Reynolds is giving evidence. He was Boris Johnson's private secretary when he was Foreign Secretary and also when he was Prime Minister. He advised him day by day, most known to the public as the man that sent that email to staff telling them to bring their own booze to that notorious garden party at Downing Street that took place during lockdown. This morning, the chair, Heather Hallett, opened the inquiry, saying that she will decide what evidence will be published after. That comes after complaints that only parts of documents and WhatsApp messages are being made public, and she's asking witnesses to respect that decision. Now, on the theme of WhatsApps, the inquiry has heard this morning that Boris Johnson did not realise that during the pandemic his WhatsApp messages might later become public. The inquiry was shown a WhatsApp message from Simon Case, the Cabinet Secretary. It's dated the 20th of December 2021, and in it Simon Case says PM is mad if he doesn't think his WhatsApps will become public via the COVID inquiry, but he's clearly not in the mood for that discussion tonight. We'll have that battle in the new year. And the exchange was shown on screen at the hearing, and it also includes Reynolds' reply. Reynolds said that he agreed. Now, when asked what he thought that was about, Reynolds said he couldn't remember, but he said that he thought Johnson had not realised his WhatsApp messages would become important during the COVID inquiry. This afternoon we'll be hearing from Lee Kane. He was the former Director of Communications at Downing Street during this time. And tomorrow we're going to be hearing from former Chief of Staff Dominic Cummings, who will also be giving evidence.
Thank you very much indeed, Lisa Hartle, there, our reporter, bringing us the latest.
But that inquiry is ridiculous. It's going to go on till at least 2026 or even 2027. Sweden, done, dusted.
Yeah, we were talking to Piers Pottinger about that earlier in the show.
Yeah, I mean, why is it taking so long? It cost an absolute fortune. The Iraq war inquiry, I think, eventually reported, was it in 2014 or something? The Iraq war was 2003. The bloody Sunday inquiry took 12 years.
And by which time, so much has changed, so much has happened. Hard to hold people to account, really, isn't it?
Yeah, some of the politicians will be no longer politicians, some of them will be dead.
Why are we so slow at everything in this country? Is that fair?
Well, to be fair to the inquiry, lots of witnesses will have to give evidence in public. They didn't go through that process in Sweden. But then Sweden didn't close down the country the way this government did.
Well, yes. They took a more laissez-faire approach.
Yeah, and they had fewer deaths.
Yeah.
Fewer excess deaths. I think it was 60 per 100,000. We were about 110.
Yeah, and of course...
So that worked well.
You know, there's all the... Well, they're deleted WhatsApp messages.
Prime Minister can't find his, apparently.
Already. Yes, don't have that phone anymore. Sorry.
You know, if it was me, a lot of my friends say, yeah, I can imagine that, because Andrew Pearce is a technical idiot. He is the Prime Minister. He has all these people around him to manage his WhatsApp messages, so I find it hard to believe that they've all vanished.
Yeah, Andrew asked me how to post a picture on his social media.
I did, and I posted it in a gigantic form, because I don't know how you edit them. I don't know. It was of Emily Carver, and it was a very nice picture of her.
Yeah, a big picture of my face. Very pixelated.
I also put a nice picture of Nigel Farage on social media to suggest that he might be going in the jungle. I'll vote for you, Nigel, if you go in.
Yeah, I'd vote for Nigel. Keep him in the jungle. I think it would be good banter.
If Matt Hancock got to third place in the jungle, Nigel will win.
Right, well, still to come.
Are you listening, Nigel? Come on and tell us. Are you going to do it?
Is he going to do it? Is he going to do it? Right, still to come. Well, we need him here. He can't go. We need him here. But still to come, mood change here. We will pay tribute to the Friends star, the icon that was Matthew Perry, who died over the weekend very sadly.
He was only 54, which is just too young.
Yes, you're with Britain's Newsroom. We're on GB News. Stay with us.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Put in your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
It's 11:24. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Emily Carver, who's in for Bev Turner.
Yes, now tributes are continuing to pour in from around the world for the star of the sitcom Friends, Matthew Perry, who sadly died only aged 54.
Well, he was found dead in his Los Angeles home on Saturday. US media reports initial post-mortem results are inconclusive, so the cause of death is yet to be determined.
Yes, well, showbiz reporter Stephanie Tecci joins us. Stephanie, thank you very much for joining us. Very, very sad, 54, no age at all. Tell us about some of the tributes that are coming in.
Well, as you can imagine, Emily and Andrew, there's just been so much shock in Hollywood and worldwide about Matthew Perry's passing. It's very unexpected. He was well loved. That iconic character of Chandler Bing is the character where people feel like he was actually our friend worldwide. People are still waiting to hear from his castmates because, as you can imagine, this has probably affected them more than anyone else because they've always previously said they all have like a brother-sister relationship and they had been on screen together for 10 years. And it was only recently we saw them come back together for that reunion. So people are waiting to hear from them. But beyond that, in the whole of Hollywood, there has been people who have been paying tribute, people who've been close friends to him, such as the actress Selma Blair, who said she's been brokenhearted by the news of Matthew's untimely passing. A lot of people didn't actually know that his mother worked as a press aide for Pierre Trudeau. So he actually went to school with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who paid tribute to him and said that he was quite funny. He's been left heartbroken about this. And then, you know, Matthew Perry, a lot of people have been asking, you know, he was still a single man, but he did have a lot of lovers. He previously went out with Julia Roberts for 6 months. He had a little fling with Gwyneth Paltrow, who actually made it well known to everybody yesterday and said that, you know, he was quite a charismatic man. So there was a lot of people who worked with him in Hollywood, but as well, you know, he was quite open about his battles with addiction. So he also helped people who were fighting drug addictions, alcohol addictions, and I can imagine we'll be hearing some of those stories over the next few days/weeks.
It's amazing, Stephanie, because I think the last episode was more than 15 years ago of Friends, and yet its popularity is undimmed. I saw somebody describing it as the most joyous sitcom of all time.
Definitely, Andrew. Friends spans all generations. You get in your younger generation now who are being introduced to Friends and they love it because the magic and the chemistry between that cast, it hasn't been replicated on TV for a very long time. It comes in an era where comedy was allowed to be comedy. And a lot of people say that is their go-to happy TV show. It's a very nice time of the 90s and even the plots, you're always going to get a laugh if you watch Friends. So I think even though now they've lost one of their cast members, I don't think it will dim people's love for Friends. If anything, it's going to increase it further.
Stephanie, he had a book published very recently, last year, I believe, and Andrew pointed out to me that in the foreword he says, "Hi, my name is Matthew, although you may know me by another name. My friends call me Matty, and I should be dead," he said. He's been very open about, as you say, his addiction and mental health problems.
Yes, Emily, this is a man who had 15 stints in rehab. He had spent $9 million to help fight his battles against opioids and alcohol. You know, in his memoir, he says that there was 3 years of when he was filming Friends that he cannot remember it because he was at the height of his addiction. Why did he come out with his memoir last year? Because he said he only felt in a place where he was just about over the line where he felt he could talk about being sober. So he is someone who's always battled it. He actually opened a safe house in Los Angeles for people as well who are facing alcohol addictions, drug addiction. So it's something that has always plagued him. And it's only in the last year he felt open to talk about that. And funnily enough, in an interview with the LA Times, he said, you know, when I do pass, I know people will be talking about friends, but he goes, also, I want to talk about being someone that could have helped people who were going through their addictions. And I think very much this is going to be his legacy now.
Really interesting. Stephanie, thank you for that. That's Stephanie Tetchy talking about the loss of that fabulous actor from Friends. I've got a terrible confession to make. I've never watched Friends.
I can't believe that. You know, some people were obsessive about it, watching every single episode and many, many times on repeat. I liked it. I enjoyed it. It was a good one.
Right.
Yeah.
I've obviously missed something because, I say, I was reading his obituaries and the descriptions of the comedy, saying how charming it was and its enduring appeal. All these, I think it was 19 years ago.
It was quite innocent. They all lived in the same apartment in New York.
Right.
And it was about their relationships, trials and tribulations, and this big group of friends, lots of romantic relationships.
And he was
as well.
Chandler, and he was the most popular character, wasn't he? I think.
I don't know, but yes, I think he was probably. Probably, but there'll be a lot of more interest in his book as well to see what he's went through.
That will go to the top of the bestsellers in a matter of days, if not weeks.
Tortured Person. Tortured Person, when it says number one bestseller on Amazon. You're with Britain's Newsroom, still to come on the show.
Burglars and drug dealers to be given a clean record and will not have to inform employees about their past misdemeanours. This is under plans to cut reoffending. Is that going to work?
And the Campaign for Real Ale is calling for more financial support to save our pubs in the face of growing pressure on the industry.
All that and much more after your morning news with Sophia.
It's 11:31. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. The government is holding an emergency meeting to discuss the threat of terrorism linked to the Israel-Hamas conflict. Cabinet ministers, including the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, have been joined by the Met Police Commissioner. The Prime Minister is also expected to speak to national security officials. It follows a rise in anti-Semitic and Islamophobic incidents across the country since the start of October. The UK's current terror threat stands at substantial, which means an attack is likely. Meanwhile, Gaza's facing an air and artillery bombardment as Israel's ground offensive into the Strip continues. Tanks and troops are pressing into the enclave, with Israel Defense Forces saying that more than 600 terrorist targets have been hit in the past few days. Airstrikes have also been reported in Gazan hospitals, with Israel accusing Hamas of hiding military infrastructure in medical facilities. In other news, artificial intelligence tools will be rolled out in classrooms across England. The Prime Minister says the technology will help reduce teachers' workloads, with AI designing lesson plans and quizzes. It's part of a £2 million investment in new classroom technology, which is equivalent to employing around 40 teachers. More wet weather is set to bring disruption to several parts of the country ahead of the arrival of Storm Ciarán this week. Heavy rain is expected in southern and southeast England, as well as Northern Ireland. The Environment Agency has issued 72 flood warnings ahead of the storm on Wednesday night. The Met Office is warning Storm Ciarán gusts of up to 90 miles as expected in some areas when Storm Ciarán hits in southern parts of England and Wales. And you can get more on all those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
For exclusive, limited edition and rare gold coins that are always newsworthy, Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2122 and €1.1461. The price of gold is £1,645 and 21 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 7,344 points.
Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Up next, burglars and drug dealers are to be given a clean record and will not have to inform employees about their past crimes. This is all about cutting reoffending. Is it going to work or is it going to outrage you?
This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Stay with us.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows,
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
What time is it? It is 11:37. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Emily Calmer, in for Bev Turner. And wittering away in the corner there was Stephen Pound, the former Labour MP. He was wittering.
He's back. He's back.
Better than twittering, anyway.
Better than twittering, that's for sure. But beer campaigners are urging the Chancellor to rescue the industry by cutting taxes before it's too late.
The Campaign for Real Ale, a campaign I wholeheartedly support, says pubs and breweries are desperate for help, but Jeremy Hunt has ruled out tax breaks ahead of the autumn statement, which is just 3 weeks away.
Yes, Will Hollis, our reporter, is going to tell us some more.
224, OK.
It's an industry thriving and barely surviving. More choice than ever, also more problems. Peter runs a microbrewery in Mansfield. He says there's fewer customers now.
We've noticed a big change in drinking habits. A lot of people are coming out one day instead of they used to come out 3 days.
Sir, thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoy your afternoon, guys.
Thank you.
At Nottingham's annual beer festival, the forecast is grim for those who make a living in the trade. The pandemic, Ukraine war and cost of living, a potent brew punishing pubs. Right now, the industry is being pounded by rising prices. And a lot of the people here today who work in the trade say that the Chancellor should be doing more to help. In a couple of weeks, the Chancellor will review his economic plan and deliver the autumn statement. 30 pubs closed every week in the first half of the year, according to CAMRA, the Campaign for Real Ale.
There you go, sir. Enjoy. I will. Thank you very much. Cheers. Cheers.
Andrew is from the Nottingham branch. He's urging the government to cut taxes and revive the industry.
I would suggest that he needs to desperately look at the VAT situation. But on top of that, we all have this very unfair rating system, or a tax that takes place on properties is so uneven.
A Treasury spokesperson said, whilst 1/3 of businesses don't pay business rates at all due to government tax relief, we recognise the challenges larger pubs and restaurants face, which is why we've slashed their bills by 75%, protected them from rising energy costs, and kept the duty on pints down through our Brexit pubs guarantee. In August, the Treasury introduced new rules. The stronger the alcohol, the higher the tax. It should favour people drinking pints in pubs. But Mila, who works behind the bar, says they need even more support.
We're a very small pub, my dad's the landlord, and we rely a lot on the support of our locals and our regulars, but it's getting to the point where maybe that might not be enough anymore.
It's a business built on flavour, in an economy leaving only a bad taste. Will Hollis, GB News in Nottingham.
Well, it's going to be hard, I think, to try and get any tax cuts out of Jeremy Hunt.
Yeah, well, we need to save the beer industry because I think the pub, Mike, is a quintessentially part of English.
Listen, it's quintessentially part of all of our lives.
It
even
is.
if you, I mean, look, you can be a moderate drinker, you can be a heavy drinker, but you want to go to the pub because you meet your friends there.
Yeah.
And in many communities, the pub is the hub of that community. You drive through small villages in Britain. What's the thing you most like? The chocolate box top pub with the thatched roof and that kind of stuff. All under threat. Now, that report, fascinating, but I'll ally that with another report I've got here. More than 44,000 licensed premises have closed in the last 20 years, leaving less than 100,000 pubs in Britain for the first time ever. We're under threat. The man who I really admire in the pub industry is the chap who runs Wetherspoons, Tim Martin. He is constantly campaigning. I mean, Mr Martin, Wetherspoons, provide booze for people who are on the lowest incomes in this country. That's no disrespect to them. Why should you have to pay £7 or £8 for a pint of beer, which sometimes you do in London, if you can get it for £2.30
Is he
in
undercutting
Wetherspoons?
those other pubs, though?
No, he's not undercutting.
Pubs.
They wouldn't be able to go to pubs if he didn't serve beer at that price.
They'd be buying 4 cans from the off-lice, from the supermarket, probably.
And Mr Martin campaigns against this. Because of lockdown, people started buying from the supermarkets. The supermarkets don't have to put VAT on their drink and food like the pubs have to, and that is terribly unfair competition. And if you want to save the pubs in this country, Mr Hunt has got to realise it's essential to the fabric and the well-being of this country, for our society, but for our people.
I think it's not going to happen. Look, I remember Gordon Brown actually reduced the tax on whiskey. I can't imagine why. It was a very great,
the fact he was Scottish?
Good Lord, you spotted it. But also we make a lot of money. Look, the reality is, and I am prepared, I have to say this, I hear them and say it now on the record, I am prepared to make the ultimate sacrifice and go to the pub, my local pub, the Viaduct, on a regular basis, possibly on a daily basis, and do my bit for the British pub, the hub. But look, let's think of the reality. The reality of it is that the drink driving laws changed it for a start. The smoking ban changed major. But nowadays, pubs, I mean, I'm actually quite a sort of conservative capitalist on this one. I think the market should actually have some say in it. Those old pubs which used to have nicotine dripping off the ceiling and you got like a cheese sandwich was the only food you got offered.
But they've gone. They've gone a long time ago.
Nowadays, I'm sorry, the pubs I go to, I know Wetherspoons. If I fancy a Guinness at 8:30 in the morning, of course I go.
Well, you wouldn't actually, because they've only open until 9. But
we have to start queuing at 8:30. But look, the reality is the modern pub is actually a very, very different pub than it was in my day. And the gastropub is an expression I don't understand.
Well, there are still watering holes.
I think it's something to do with snails, isn't it?
There
There are still wet pubs. Sorry, but we still like to go out into the country for what you'd call the country pub, the English country pub, and they are still there. And you've got all the, you know, the brass ornaments around and the oak beams and all that. And I love all that. Sorry,
crisp. Couple of pints and a bag of salt.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, absolutely.
There are still pubs where you walk in and everyone looks at you. Oh, she's not from round here.
Yeah, that's the American.
I like that though. It's kind of like this is our. You know, this is
American
our community.
Werewolf in London.
Yeah, that's right. But the slaughtered lamb.
That's right.
And you come in, the place goes.
Yeah.
You know, you immediately feel come to Hanwell, come to the Viaduct.
Yeah, but I still think they are essential to the fabric of our life. People can get together. People can quieten down there. They can de-stress. They can. I mean, to be honest, I work from a pub sometimes because if I've got work to do, it's easier to do it in a confined space in the back room of my pub than it is to do it anywhere else.
Mike, here's the interesting thing. I talked about my local pub. I run the Hanwell Carnival Committee. We have our Carnival Committee meetings there. We have our football team there. We have our own pub football team there.
Yeah.
We have even the reading, you know, the book club.
Yeah.
You know, so it is what Mike said about the pub is the hub is absolutely crucial.
And if you're in the pub, what's your poison? What do you drink?
Well, I don't like real ale. I think it's a bit like sucking a meat pie through a straw. I don't like it.
I don't agree.
I mean, I'm afraid I like a cool, crisp, refreshing lager with a Jameson's chaser.
I find too much gas in lager. I like Ghost Ship's bitter, OK?
Right.
And the Ghost Ship bitter, absolutely fantastic.
What did you say?
A Ghost Ship bitter.
Oh, thank heavens you stop it.
Because I'm an old-fashioned boy. I was brought up in a working-class household, and the first time my father took me to the pub, it was a pint of bitter on the bar, OK? And I've been like that ever since.
I got half a brown ale.
Half a brown ale, yeah.
Well, brown ale?
It would be a bottle of brown ale, probably.
It was a bottle.
Bottle of brown ale.
Yeah.
My dad used to let me put my finger in the top of his Guinness and get the froth off the top.
Well, obviously mine is a glass of ice cold rosé.
Ice cold rosé, hey?
Winter.
Nice pink glass.
Not Kylie Minogue's.
No, not one of those sweet ones.
But you know, this government is screwed politically, pretty much.
Yeah.
Wouldn't this be a real vote winner?
Well,
to do something to help the local pub?
Absolutely. Reach out to those who are the working people. And by the way, people think that only, you know, those who can't afford anything else go to Wetherspoon pubs. I can assure you, I'm a big fan of Wetherspoons. Did you know on a Friday...
You get a good meal there for a decent price.
I was about to say, on a Friday, they are the biggest fish and chip shop in the world.
Are they really?
Sell tens of thousands of plates of fish and chips, and if I can, every Friday I try to go.
But at Greenfield we have steak night and curry night.
Yeah, that's right, curry night.
Prices are different,
not the same
depending
night.
on where you are as well, aren't they?
Yeah.
So a Wetherspoons in central London will be more expensive than a Wetherspoons in...
Did you grow up with fish and chips on a Friday?
Oh, absolutely.
Catholic household?
Well,
every Friday?
It didn't necessarily have to be fish and chips. My father would say, we're always having fish on a Friday, and it might be haddock or plaice, but it was definitely fish on a Friday.
We had fish cakes sometimes, homemade.
Yes.
That's
exactly what we had. Because people say, don't go to Mac Fisheries, you make your own fish cake.
My father made his own. It's very nice. And I miss that Friday tradition.
Oh, yeah, I do as well,
Should we move on? I think we could talk about pubs all day.
Sure, I think we should.
This is a peculiar story.
We'll go to the Viaduct.
You'll be so welcome.
This is a peculiar story. Burglars and drug dealers to get given a clean record and will not have to inform employers about their past crimes. That's got to do with cutting the reoffending rate, Mike. What's this about?
Well, I'm not sure about this. Look, I'm very big on rehabilitation of prisoners in jails. What is the point of sending a man to jail and he comes out the same person he was when he went in? If in between, and I have to say, business has risen to the challenge, you can train that person inside the prison to become a chef, or you can train him to become a useful member of society when he comes out. However, I still think that once you've come out, you have to know the background of the person you're employing. So, for instance, I mean, if only so you can give them an appropriate job. So, for instance, supposing the guy's come out and he served 6 years because he's a safe breaker, OK? Well, you take him on in your business that's built up, but you don't put him in charge of the accounts because it might be too tempting, might it? You know, with the instincts of criminality and all that. But what I'm saying is I'm supportive of training people to be useful when they're in jail, but I do think every employer has the right to know the full background of the person they're employing.
Well, not only do they have the right, I think if it did happen that you did employ a wrong and something went wrong, you could...
There'd be a hell of a row, wouldn't
But
there?
look, I think Jamie Oliver and his restaurant, The Clink,
Yes.
which is an excellent idea. But for me, one of the great unsung heroes of the last 50 or 60 years is Timpson. The Timpson family, they take... And,
Keys and all that.
Keys and
Yeah.
shoe repairs shops and that. But the point is, because one of them was actually an MP for Crewe for quite a long time.
Yes, he was.
And I said to him, I said, do...
Edward Timpson. Very nice
Edward
man.
Timpson, a smashing bloke. And he said, look, we're not in the least bit ashamed of people's past. In fact, we would rather know because we can still employ them. The fact that you've got a record doesn't mean you can never get a job.
Yeah.
And I think Jamie Oliver and Edward Timpson and those people have actually shown that. But when I was in my brief time as a prison officer, I noticed very, very quickly about 70% of the people inside were illiterate.
Yeah.
And I agree. I mean, I think Mike Parry, he's one of these sort of soft, whinging liberals, Guardian reading.
Yes, that's right.
The idea
I've made
that's why we like it. That's why we get on so well.
Rehabilitation.
I've made a life study of it.
Rehabilitation is an absolutely superb idea, but we've got to start with the two absolute basics are firstly the family and the second the home to go to.
Yeah. And also, I'm sorry, Andrew, I think the chap who's served his time and come out should be bold enough and brave enough to say to an employer, I have erred, I have been punished, I now want to live a new life.
Otherwise, the relationship is false from day one.
Exactly. I want you to put your faith in me. So you know everything about me, now I want to know everything about your company.
And of course, one of the problems of prison overcrowding is that so many prisoners are stuck in their cell for 23 hours, which means they don't get to learn to read and write. And if you talk to Jeffrey Archer, old mate of mine, when Jeffrey was in prison for perjury, ridiculous that he was ever sent to prison in the first place, that's another argument. He spent most of his time in the library
educating other prisoners,
and he was staggered by how many young men couldn't read or write a word.
Well, one of my brothers is a priest, and he used to actually say mass at the Scrubs, and he said, he's a very naive lad. He said it's wonderful the number of people who take the Bibles back to their cells. And I said, how can I tell you this? Actually, the paper is so thin in those Bibles, it's perfect for rolling cigarettes, which you could in those days.
You've broken his heart. I thought he was a great reformer.
We've got an issue with extremism in our prisons, though, and this links to what we've been discussing before.
That's a good point as well.
We have, I totally agree, and they should be treated separately.
Radicalisation.
But Stephen has identified, the terrible plight of some prisoners who never really stood a chance. Some prisoners are in prison because they never had anybody who they thought cared for them. The broken families they mostly came from. If they come out and an employer puts his faith in them, I think human values will respond and they'll say, I'm not going to let this man down,
People are much more charitable, I think, than people give credit for often.
Well, it's interesting that prisons used to be called reformatories. And, the idea was you went to prison not as a punishment. I mean, it's only the last couple of 100 years that people have actually done prison time. Prisons used to be a place you went before you got executed. And then the idea came of holding people as hostages, and then it came on from there. But the idea is that you actually improve a person and give them the chance. And what amazed me about the prisoners I used to work with is in many cases they actually wanted to be there because they had 3 square meals a day, and they had some security, and it was safe.
And company.
And which is all the more reason why it's the next stage, the transitional stage, when you come back into society. And yet you try to build a bail hostel anywhere where there's other houses around, and people oh no, we can't have that.
But the other thing about prisons, of course, they become a hothouse for drugs. And the other thing, you've talked to people like Jonathan Aitken, who went to prison for perjury as well, now a prison chaplain.
Exactly.
The former Tory MP, he says that the prisons are full of drugs, and some young men go into prison who've never had drugs and come out an addict.
They've got to reform the whole prison system because also there's the Islamic threat in some prisons, isn't there, of people being turned and all that kind of stuff. When I worked in Ireland for 3 years at the height of the Troubles, they didn't reform the prisons, and it was absolutely true that some people convicted of IRA offences went into the prison where they'd just been a runner for the local gang and came out as a trained bomb maker.
Well, that was in the maze. But I mean,
exactly, in the H-box.
I mean, in Maghaberry and Magilligan, and I did a lot of work there. I can still remember doing a public meeting with Jerry Adams. He said, well, prison does work. It keeps the prison officers off the streets.
Well, that's about right. But I mean, it was a training camp.
Also in Maghaberry and Magilligan, you had the green wing and they had the orange wing, and it was the old snooker balls in the sock if you cross the line.
Fascinating. Should we squeeze in a royal story? This is a funny one.
It's David Beckham. He's gone off Prince Harry, who hasn't, and he's now being nice to the King.
Give him a night to it. I think maybe he thinks Prince Harry is related to Paul Scholes, and I think that's what it's all about, really.
Paul Scholes?
Yes, so he's taken up an invitation with the King, and there's been all sorts of reports in the papers in the last few months about how Beckham's gone off, the Beckham family have completely gone off Prince Harry. They're no longer friends.
Who hasn't gone off him? Terrible man.
I'm sure you know the background to this. The background is that Harry made a wild phone call to the Beckhams. I don't know if he talked to David exactly, and accused them of leaking stories, right, to the press.
Pot and kettle. And the Queen was leaking them as well, apparently.
And the Queen was leaking them. I mean, talk to hear about the most famous couple in the world, you know, Beckham and Posh, leaking stories about somebody else. No, thank you. They've spent their life trying to stop people leaking stories about them. So that all, and then the relations got very frosty. However, behind this is David Beckham's absolute desire to get a K. Why
does he need one?
Because he wants one. Because he's done everything else.
Affection, acclamation.
No, but he's got everything else. He's done everything else. He now wants a K. And the last time the list came up and he wasn't on it, he went around and told a lot of his friends, I hate the establishment, you know, and so he's getting close to the King now, because the King apparently has opened the door to say, do you want to become an advisor on one of my charities?
There we are.
Right, Posh will get a damehood before he gets
David.
That's all we've got time for. That is all we've got time for.
You've never got a night, have you?
No. That's Mike Parry and of course Stephen Pound.
Stephen Pound, who is plain Mr. Pound and not Sir Stephen Pound. What did you do, Rob?
That's all from us. That's all for us.
Good morning, my name's Rachel Ayres and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast brought to you by the Met Office. So we saw plenty of rain and showers throughout the weekend and not a huge amount of change as we go into the new week. Heavy showers that could be thundery across southern parts of Wales and England as we go through this morning, with that overnight rain having cleared away from Scotland and northeast England. Some sunny spells around as well, especially across Scotland and central and eastern parts of England. And it'll feel pretty pleasant here, especially away from the coast where those winds are a little bit lighter. So highs of 14 to 16 in the south, though a little bit cooler in the north with those northerly winds. Now, as we go through this afternoon, we'll see further showers continuing, but this band of showers will become a little bit more organised into this evening and bringing some heavy and persistent rain to Northern Ireland, so there could be some disruption here. Plenty of clear spells, though, ahead of this, especially across southern England and Scotland. And a bit of a chilly night across Scotland as well. Could be a touch of frost in some sheltered rural spots. So to start Tuesday then, we'll see this band of organised showers making its way very slowly northeastwards. So driest conditions to the northeast of this with the best of the sunshine across Scotland. A little bit of respite from the showers across the southwest before this next system makes its way in as we go into Tuesday afternoon. And still feeling pretty pleasant in the sunshine. Always cooler though across Scotland with those northerly winds bringing that cooler air.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.